The Chicago Bears coaching staff is getting its first experience with Justin Fields and the rest of this roster at voluntary minicamps. And early on, the focus for the young quarterback is on his feet.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Blue Nile. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Bears listeners get $50 off $500 purchases. Use code LOCKEDON at checkout. On the show today, we check in on the first day of voluntary minicamps for the Chicago Bears under Matt Eberflus, with a particular focus on, of course, the focus of everything, Justin Fields. And really the work for him has been focused on his footwork and getting rid of the ball quicker. So we'll learn a little bit more about what new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy and quarterbacks coach Andrew Janocko are having Fields do differently so far to kind of shift how he's going about things and maybe kind of get that foundational piece in place there to take those next steps this offseason. We'll hear from Fields himself on what the changes are like. We'll hear from Matt Eberflus as well as far as what they're looking for him to do and how they're looking for that to improve his game. And then finally, we'll check in on Fields and hear his thoughts on what happened last season, how it went, and how the Bears coaching staff did in terms of putting him in a position to be successful. But for now, they're trying to put him in a position to be more successful this year. The new coaching staff taking a different approach with Fields, particularly when it comes to that footwork. And a lot of times, the intricacies of quarterbacking can be just that, intricate, can be a little bit, inside baseball is the cliche, but inside football, it can be a little bit intricate. But it's interesting when you sort of put yourself in Fields' shoes and kind of work through it that way. So Fields was sort of asked first and foremost, like, hey, minicamps here, what are you working on? What kind of things is kind of the emphasis here early on in this process, besides the obvious of just getting to know people and of course the playbook?
What have you been doing the last few months as far as working with Luke and trying to get a handle on the offense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just getting with him and going through the offense, of course. And one big thing was changing my drop. Last year in the gun, I had my right foot forward, so I've been working a lot with my left foot forward in the gun.
What does that do for you?
It just, their offense is just what they do in their offense. At times they're better with routes and stuff like that. So that's why we do it.
Anything other than that Luke is emphasizing this early phase with you that he really wants you to focus in on?
Right now, we're just trying to, just get the offense installed and just, get this thing kind of going. So just kind of building just day by day right now.
It might not sound like much, have standing in shotgun and having his left foot forward instead of his right foot forward. But if that's where he's starting his drop back from, that can then change how the rest of the timing and the drop back for the rest of the play goes from there. If you think about it yourself physically, you can stand up wherever you are right now doing this. Or I can't do it sitting down while I'm doing the podcast, but if you ever pretended to be a quarterback ever at home, assuming you're right-handed, the lefties might have a different experience with this, but if you ever stood there, even just pretending to be in the shotgun, just naturally do it right now and notice your feet, which foot is forward. As a right-handed person, as most of us, I think, statistically are, you're inclined to have that right foot forward because, well, I think it's because it's your dominant foot, and that's what forward. And you sort of when you drop back from taking the snap, you sort of push off of that right foot, and then start to do your drop back from there. But if you're pushing off from the left foot instead, you're really sort of getting into that first drop back quicker because, of course, a right-handed quarterback, when you think about dropping back to pass, so you're your shoulders are going to be your left shoulder forward and your right shoulder back, if of course as a right-handed person, and so therefore your left foot is also going to be the more forward foot in your drop back, and your right foot is the back foot when you're stepping into throw, right? The right foot is always going to be your back foot. That's where your dominant hand is and where the force starts when you're generating as a passer. But if you're pushing off with your left foot first, then that starts your first step of your drop back differently than it would be when you push off with your right foot first, right? Your right foot then has to step back behind your left foot before you then push off with your left foot to get into your second step. But when you're starting with the left foot first, that's taking away that first step of the drop back. And so, or it's more like a half a step, but it still is speeding up that process a little bit more quickly. And then that's going to be then in Luke Getsy's offense, the timing that the receivers are on. A lot of these offenses are built so that based on how many steps the quarterback is going to take, the receivers should be a certain distance downfield or a certain distance into their route based on where the quarterback is in his footwork in a standard drop back. Of course, like shotgun, play action and rollout can change some of the drop back timing, for example. But if he's in a 5-step drop, by the time he gets to that 5th step, he's supposed to know that wide receiver on my left is this far into his slant route, and wide receiver on my right is this far into his dig route, or whatever the combination of routes are going to be, or this deep into his post route, and know, okay, based on how far I am in my footwork, then that's how far along my receiver should be. And if I'm reading the coverage at the same time, I should know that if I'm this deep in my footwork, and I know this receiver then at that depth is going to be this far into his route, I know that part of his route is going to beat this coverage that we're facing, and you fire the ball off from there. Extremely difficult and complex to process in the less than 3 seconds from when you snap the ball to when you throw the ball, but that's why playing quarterback in the NFL is particularly difficult and why very few people are actually truly great at it. But you can see where just slightly switching which foot is forward and then starts changing where you start your drop back can then but adjust or create a new type of timing on how you're going to play out every route from there. And it'll be an adjustment for Fields that needs to start now so he can be more comfortable and used to it by the time the regular season comes around. But it seems like from everything we've been hearing from head coach Matt Eberflus so far that they're confident this is going to be the right thing for Fields and help keep putting him more in that proper direction. We'll hear from that Bears head coach on the progress and what they're sort of looking for from Fields in this progress next on Locked On Bears. Mother's Day is just around the corner, and if you're looking for the perfect gift for mom, something enduring, like some classic diamond stud earrings, elegant bracelets, birthstone pendants, and so much more, all from our friends at BlueNile.com. It can be hard to pick out fine jewelry, but Blue Nile has a jewelry expert on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. It's a great way to really make that statement piece, or sometimes they have subtle elegance as well. Any kind of flavor you're looking for in that jewelry, BlueNile.com has the options for every mom or really every woman in your life. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant bracelets, pendant necklaces, so many different ways you can treat that special woman. This Mother's Day, give mom something special that she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Bears listeners are going to get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive is good only through Mother's Day. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, ships for free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. Chicago Bears are trying to speed things up for Justin Fields, not only in terms of learning this offense, but also getting rid of the ball a little bit more quickly. And they've been very clear that they're not saying that's the whole reason the Bears' offense was bad and that their offensive line doesn't deserve any blame and that Fields just needs to get rid of it quickly and therefore all things problem solved. But that is something they've identified as a thing Justin Fields can work on improving. And when we sort of focus in specifically on this Bears quarterback, that's really been the early point of emphasis here from the new coaching staff. And so we've been sort of getting perspective. We got the perspective from Fields. We heard a little bit earlier this offseason from Luke Getsy and on how this whole process is sort of supposed to work. But I thought Matt Eberflus, the head coach, did a really good job yesterday in sort of outlining more specifically how that footwork adjustment can speed things up and where exactly they're looking for that speed and processing to really make that impact and have that, where in his drop back, where in his processing, in his quarterbacking period, that they want to see that specific improvement.
I know you've said before with Justin this year, it's about getting the ball out of his hands quickly. When you can't simulate like live drills and pass rush at this point of the offseason, how do you go about having him like hone that skill?
Yeah, I think it's about footwork and then the timing. Footwork and timing. There should be a clock, on every single drop that he takes. There's the drop, the number of steps, and then there's a hitch or there's a second hitch. And that ball's got to be out of his hands on the first one or the second one, based on the coverage and based on the call.
He talked earlier about like when he's in the gun, changing his footwork from going from I think it's from right to left. Has that helped him getting the ball out quicker, just from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that right now, but I'm sure it will eventually. And I think that his footwork is getting a lot cleaner, and that's going to help him, get through the ball and get it out faster.
So it was one practice, right, to start. So the Bears don't have clear progress to measure up to this point, but it has been something I think that's been an emphasis even before Fields got into working hands-on here with his teammates at minicamp. But I think to kind of go through a few of the things that Eberflus talked about there, I mean, we've heard a lot before, just from regular broadcasts watching football about that internal clock that quarterbacks are supposed to have. And that idea that, well, if a quarterback has been under pressure a lot in the game, maybe it speeds up that internal clock a little bit and he ends up getting rid of the ball more quickly, even perhaps than he should. But Eberflus got into specifically that idea of you go from your drop back into your hitch and then sometimes a second hitch, and how he wants it to really be out on that first or second hitch, depending on what the coverage is and what the play call is. And of course, there are going to be plays that take more time to develop where things aren't open, where Fields will need to extend the plays with his legs and deviate a little bit from some of this specific training that they're working towards. But I think the idea is that in an ideal world, the protection will be good enough, the receivers will be good enough, and the play call will be good enough against the coverage that they're facing that he won't, in theory, have to extend plays all the time with his legs and be that out of the pocket playmaker. Of course, that's a great thing that Fields is capable of doing and that they would like him to do and want him to do. I don't think they're going to discourage Fields from using his legs, generally speaking, but that should all be bonus, right? In an ideal world, the offense and the receivers and the offensive line and the quarterback should function so well that you don't need Fields to have to do that stuff, that he can just stay in the pocket, deliver accurate passes, and move the offense downfield and score points without needing him to run around for 5 seconds and find somebody open downfield on a beautiful throw down the sideline that he's capable of doing. But that should all be bonus in case of emergency type stuff to bail you out when things don't go well. But it shouldn't be the modus operandi. It shouldn't be the go-to option. It shouldn't be what you're trying to rely on. You shouldn't rely on it if at all possible, because that just makes Fields' job so much more difficult and is asking a heck of a lot from a particularly young quarterback. And so what Eberflus is talking about with those dropbacks and hitches is that when you get to the end of your dropback, really the last step doesn't really count in when you're counting steps. It doesn't exactly count in a 5-step drop, 3-step drop type thing. The hitch is the very last thing you do where you really sort of set your feet and then deliver. But sometimes what you'll do is you'll set your feet and then there's that extra bounce and then you set your feet a second time and throw into it to where it's not part of the counting of your drop back of a 3-step drop, a 5-step drop, a 7-step drop, etc. But it's you drop back, hitch, you sort of you plant at the end of your drop back and then you hitch that second time, almost when you see the quarterback kind of bouncing on their toes a little bit in the pocket and then really stepping into it and throwing that ball. I mean, that's the second hitch. And I think what they don't want him to do is drop back and then be standing there and hitch and maybe hitch again and kind of, get rid of the ball, I think is the emphasis. And that's something that I think you can see Fields, sometimes last season maybe try too much to create plays with his legs sometimes when it could be better to throw the ball away or to take the route that's open or take the first route you see, even if you want, you're holding out and you're hoping for something bigger and better in the play because, you want to make the big play, but sometimes just taking what's there for you and doing what you can with it can be the better option. But I think most importantly, it's about cleaning up that footwork in general that Eberflus talked about there at the end. And this idea, like last season, when we'd see Fields be inaccurate on some of those throws that you really felt like he should have hit, some of those, like a little curl route or a slant that'll just be too high or too low. So often it was because his footwork was a little bit all over the place to where, when he's dropping back, it's not neat and in an orderly line and distance, but sometimes the feet are kind of deviating a little bit left and right as he's kind of dropping back. It's not a straight, clean chop of the feet dropping back. And then also, almost more importantly, when he's stepping into throws, he's not always fully stepping into throws the right way and transferring the proper amount of force and weight from the back foot to the front foot. And sometimes, of course, like you can make those throws even without stepping into them properly. But there were some times when like he would still be stepping into it, but he would kind of step into it wrong and it would affect the accuracy, right? It's not just like he's just arming it and the arm was inaccurate, but like he is trying to step into it. It's just not a proper stepping into it. And that's part of where you see that need to clean up the footwork, and seems to be a pretty big emphasis that Eberflus seems to be confident in them cleaning up and seeing some sort of progress there. But and then, of course, as the footwork gets a little bit more crisp, it can also speed up that delivery and that release, which we've seen some of from, practice videos posted on social media just of him working out with teammates in Atlanta and all that stuff this offseason. So it seems like the foundational steps are, at least on paper, sound like good ideas with pushing towards good progress. Easier said than done. It's all good and well to hear that, but we do need to actually like see that down the line, but at least sort of checking that box of like, yep, they seem to be working on the right things. And that's at the very least encouraging and heading in the right direction. Certainly a better direction than they were in last season. And Fields was kind of asked about that and declined the opportunity to really throw the former coaching staff under the bus. But we'll kind of read between the lines a little bit and look back at where the challenges really were for Fields next on Locked On Bears. Today's episode of Locked On Bears brought to you by the makers of the world's best tasting protein bars, Built Bars. They really are delicious. I eat one every single day, and I'm constantly reordering to get new boxes in so I don't run out for very long because they taste so good. They taste like candy bars. They're soft, they're easy to chew, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in a bunch of great flavors. But most importantly, Built Bars are also really good for you. They're all low sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. It's an unbeatable combination of taste good and good for you that you can't find anywhere else in any other protein bar product. I'm telling you, you got to try them for yourself, and when you taste it, you'll believe it too. Head on over to Built.com, enter in our promo code, LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We know last season was not the ideal situation for Justin Fields to succeed. And if you look at the Bears roster right now, some members of the national media have argued that it's also currently not the ideal situation for Justin Fields to succeed. And on Monday's podcast, we kind of went through some of those arguments and kind of poked some holes and set the record straight a little bit on just some overall bad Justin Fields takes we've heard from members of the national and regional media around here. So make sure you go back and listen to that one if you did not, because we got a little fired up there and kind of set the record straight. But regardless, it was not ideal for Fields last season, and he would have every reason to, be a little bit, not spiteful, but just, a little bit sore about how things went last season, how the previous regime handled his rookie season. And he was kind of given that opportunity and asked, it's a little bit hard to hear the media questions in here, but he was asked, first of all, like what he learned from last season. And then the follow-up question that you can hear a little bit easier is that, did you feel like last season you were always put in the best position to be successful? And Fields, as you might expect, took the high road as much as he could, but did sort of, let you read between the lines a little bit and acknowledge some of the struggles for sure.
You look back at your rookie year, how would you describe it?
A lot of ups and downs, but I definitely learned a lot. So, thankful for all the experiences and, stuff we had to go through. And it's the stuff last year is just going to make me better. So, of course, I'm excited for year 2.
Do you think you were always put in the best position to succeed last year?
I think I was always put in the best position to succeed. I don't know. But at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. You just have to, handle what you got and, try to make the best out of it. So, yeah.
So Fields there, going with instead of saying yes or no, goes with the I don't know, but let me kind of deflect it a little bit more from there. And by all means, I would expect nothing different from Fields. He's not going to come out and say, yeah, that last coaching staff were idiots who didn't know what to do with me and weren't prepared or any of that stuff. No, he's not going to come out and say that. But, I think on the flip side, if we start to sort of, read between the lines a little bit here, I don't want to put words into Fields' mouth, but he could have said, if he truly, had the utmost respect and admiration for Matt Nagy and the previous coaching staff, he could have answered that question. And even if he was lying, he could have said, yeah, I do feel like last year my coaching staff, they were doing their best. We had some difficult situations, but I really felt like they were trying everything they could to put me in the best position to be successful. And sometimes we were successful and sometimes we weren't, but I don't think that was a result of them not doing everything they can to help me, right? I mean, he could have said something along those lines and also did not, right? So as much as he didn't say the mean things, he also chose not to say the particularly nice things either, and not that he should be expected to say those either, but right, as much as we can kind of look both directions on the what he did say and what he didn't say type of situation. But I do like his answer where he says, doesn't matter, I still have to be the best I can be, whether or not the situation is good or not around me. And that's exactly the type of competitive nature and sort of self-focused or self-motivated, focused type of quarterback that you want, that doesn't look around and say, you know what, my situation was so bad, I didn't have any chance to be good, so it's not my problem, it's not my fault. Him look and say, no, you know what, regardless of whether or not the coaching staff was smart and prepared and whatever kind of adjectives you want to pick, I still could have done more, or I still needed to be better, I still needed to do the best I could, and I still have things I can do to be better and to remedy the situation and to improve and develop and do all the things that we want to see Justin Fields do. And even he said he was sort of thankful for the experiences because he did say, he learned a lot. And it's a good point that, you learn from the ups and the downs. And he's been a quarterback that has had mostly success through a lot of his career. I mean, I know he had some adversity in terms of going to Georgia originally and then transferring to Ohio State and having to sit on the bench. But in terms of on the field, actual in-game performances, he won so consistently at Ohio State. It wasn't like he went through a lot of moments of struggling and throwing interceptions and some of the things we saw last season where he didn't play as great as we associate Justin Fields' ability to play based on what we saw in college. And so I think there is, silver lining levels of some value to that. By no means was it good for Fields to play poorly and to have a bad situation. No, it was not ideal, and it was not a thing you would want or would ask for, but I do think there can be benefits that he does pull from that it was not purely all bad, and that those experiences are things he can learn from and lean on and point to when he goes through future adversity. And also, it's also one of those examples in terms of seeing, if you're a younger sibling growing up and you saw your older brother do something and you kind of thought, I'm going to learn, or your older sister or whatever, I'm going to not do that, right? See the example of what not to do from the coaching staff. I think there could be some value there, not in terms of him disregarding everything the coaching staff ever told him, but more saying okay, he knows now what it looks like when a coaching staff doesn't properly prepare for his, starting, and when they don't properly put him in the best position to be successful. He knows what that doesn't look like, or he knows what it looks like when they don't do that. And so he can then in the future also be able to better identify when they don't do that, and maybe by contrast also have a better sense of what it actually does look and feel like to be put in the proper position to be successful, to have a game plan in place for him when he makes his first career start against the Cleveland Browns, instead of just putting him in the Andy Dalton offense and expecting him to just do everything except pretty much the same way and not really have anything super well thought out and prepared for him, just because even though there was supposed to be a plan, the Bears had a plan for everything. We're following the plan. The plan definitely did not have enough proper contingencies for the things that happened last season. We don't have to rehash the whole 2021 season all over again. We lived that semi-nightmare at times. We're not going to go through all that again, but it was clear, right? And Fields didn't say it, but we all know it. He was not put in the best position to be successful last season. We're hoping that this new coaching staff is able to do so. It's certainly fair to look at the current state of the roster and have some questions about how all that's going to happen this season. But I also think this is still early, and they only have, I think what Matt Eberflus said, they have like 60 players under contract or whatever right now. So like there's still 30 more that are going to be here before like OTAs and before training camp. So that's like a third of the roster. And yes, it's mostly going to be the bottom third of the roster, but there are still draft picks and free agents that will be brought in that will presumably play fairly significant roles this upcoming season and still shape what the supporting cast is going to look like. The project, the team building effort is not done yet, so we can't put our full evaluation on, okay, how good is this supporting cast and what position Fields is going to be in yet, because we just don't know fully what that's going to look like just yet. Anytime we get more information about what it'll look like, you can be sure we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Barring any big free agent signing or something like that, we got more minicamp news and notes to break down. Matt Eberflus switching up some things on the offensive line and looking at maybe guys left to right and trying some different things out with different players. We'll talk about Trevis Gibson and some of the things he learned from Khalil Mack and this idea of switching from the 3-4 and the 4-3 and how that whole process is going to go for there, and just how everyone is adapting to Matt Eberflus's hits principle and all the different news and notes coming out of minicamp. So lots more to get to this week. I hope you'll keep tuning in, and I hope that as a result, it'll make it just a little bit easier for you to bear down.